Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this session on revitalizing multilateralism through anticipatory science and diplomacy. My name is Marga Gual-Soler. I am the founder of SciDip Global and the academic co-chair of the GESDA Anticipatory Science Diplomacy Capacity Building Initiative. I'd like to extend a special welcome to the members of the Club Diplomatique of Geneva, who are joining us today for this session and for the reception afterwards. So we are standing between you and the cocktail reception. Thanks for the patience and for keeping up the energy. As we know, and we've talked about extensively over the past 2 days, the COVID-19 pandemic has been and continues to be a kind of a live case study for science diplomacy, revealing deep fractures in the multilateral system and the immense challenges of building effective science policy interfaces at the global level. This highlights the need for a revitalization of science diplomacy and a major update on the frameworks that underpin it, so we can build the appropriate diplomatic envelopes to foster these multilateral, inclusive, and equitable solutions to global challenges. But we have already talked enough, I think, about the why. We all agree that this is very important. And the question that has been repeating throughout the sessions is the what and the how. So in this session, we are pleased to address very concretely this what and how. And we will talk about the ways each of the stakeholders in a science diplomacy ecosystem can develop the necessary tools, skills, interfaces, mechanisms, incentives, both at the educational and the professional levels, at the institutional and individual levels, to bridge these worlds that, as we have seen, are often so disconnected. The GESDA Breakthrough Radar is one of the tools that is already being translated as an educational and teaching tool, and you will hear more about this and other exciting announcements that we have at the end of the session. And I also want to pick up on some of the questions that came up in previous sessions. You will remember the question from Karin in the previous plenary about who are these science diplomats, who are these people that can bridge between the worlds, and how can we make more of them? So this is going to be the core of our conversation today. So for this, we have an outstanding panel of leaders that are already innovating in this space, in the way we build those bridges from their sectors and institutions, representing academia, government, and the UN system. So let me introduce you to our speakers. First, we have Madame Micheline Calmy-Rey, the former president of the Swiss Confederation and a visiting professor at the University of Geneva. We have Joël Maison, president of ETH Zurich and the co-chair of the GESDA Academic Forum. We have Yves Flukiger, pardon my French and my German, it's really not, as you see, my strength, who is the rector of the University of Geneva. And finally, we have Nikhil Seth, the executive director of the United Nations Training and Research Institute, UNITAR. So let's start with you, Joël. From your standpoint, at one of the leading academic institutions in the world, where many of these frontier breakthroughs and advancements are being developed, what is the role of universities in science diplomacy in shaping this future of multilateralism?
So thank you for the question. You will hear some parallelism with what Patrick Ebischer said earlier. So it shows that we talk to each other. That's the good part between Zurich and Lausanne. And, you know, we have 3 missions at the university. First is research at the highest possible level. Second is education. And the third one is translation. And now comes our big frustration. As a university, we provide solutions, but they are rarely taken over by society. And what do we do about this? I think there is a problem on both sides. Mm-hmm. There is a problem of transmitting, but also explaining what we are doing. You mentioned the COVID before. That's an example where actually things moved very fast, where it was possible to translate what we had in the labs into a product and and really to move, to find solutions to a huge problem. I will come back to some things that didn't go right, but take the climate change. 20 years that the science community alerts our society that there is an issue, that we are going into the war, and still nothing happens. Switzerland just voted against a CO2 law just a few months ago. So clearly, we are not capable of transmitting our messages. And clearly, we have an issue about going away from our ivory tower down to the streets. And this is where we need to make a special effort. If we are not able to do this effort, then what we are observing is that the divide in the society, and here I'm talking about 3 different points. We see that at the personal level, when we talk to the citizens, within the families maybe. We see that at the community level. Think about the dialogue that there is between cities and the countryside, and between the nations. And for me, it's one and the same problem. It's the dialogue between all these different parties at this different level. And of course, now we are talking diplomacy, so I will maybe focus on this aspect a little bit more. We develop technologies in our universities that could help, and I said could help international organizations to move forward. We all know that multilateral organizations have troubles at the moment. Think about conflicts and UN, how to solve the conflicts. Think about WHO. What was the role of WHO in the current crisis? World Trade Organization, how long it has been since the last agreement was found? I think it's more than a decade. And so what we observe is that the nations protect themselves, and we have seen that during the COVID time also. People protect themselves. And so we need to bring the emotion down. How we do that? Maybe through mathematics, through technologies. And this is probably where you will intervene, Mrs. Camire, at some point. So that would be my introducing statements.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Joel. And you set the stage exactly for the next intervention. So, Micheline, your career trajectory represents already and exemplifies this bridge between science and foreign policy as a politician, as an academic. Can you give us some insights and concrete examples of how states can use the scientific advancements, technological tools that we are seeing emerging from the labs, for example, in engineering better negotiations, peace building, conflict resolution? Please give us some insights on how is this, what's coming next.
Thank you very much. Just Joel said just now, scientists are not capable to transmit the messages. I do not quite agree with that, because among other things, the pandemic, but also the climate crisis have recently illustrated the role of multilateralism and put to the fore the role of science. On a global level, the scientific method have provided essential elements for the democratic debates, and its expertise have given the measures of the dangers. And it holds the key of deliberation that must lead citizens to choose between all possibilities, all possible futures. And at the same time, it has demonstrated an urgent need to create modern technology capable to resist to an invasion of fake data. So I would say, having in mind the revitalizing of multilateralism and having in mind both scientific diplomacy and the scientification of diplomacy, I think they are very useful today. They can help because we know current and looming international conflicts are getting more and more complex and technical. Additionally, the global environment is being increasingly disrupted by a variety of factors, including new technologies, and enhanced scientific methods. Technology-based research in artificial intelligence, in machine learning, for example, for international relations and negotiations can play a substantial role in facilitating diplomatic and multilateral solutions. At the same time, international policy professionals are often unaware of rational and scientific method of negotiation. I speak here about what we call here in Geneva, the negotiation engineering, that is inspired from the l'horlogerie, you know, the watchmaking. And this is a method that has a potential to lead to better solution in negotiation, and sustainable knowledge transfer needs to be transferred to policy professionals. That means scientification of diplomacy should be developed through universities, for example. I will give you, perhaps it seems a little bit complicated what I am saying, but I will give you a little example. I give you the example of the 2011 Swiss mediated accession of the Russian Federation to the WTO. It was really a political problem. The point of contention had always boiled down to the different understandings the two parties had and still have of what constituted the Georgian customs area, given that South Ossetia and Abkhazia were considered as being part of Georgian territory, but recognized from Russia as independent states. It was consequently important to avoid any reference to the Georgian border. But how is it possible? I am asking you, how is it possible to control the passage of goods between two countries, Georgia and Russia, a condition for the accession of Russia to the WTO, without border and without checkpoints? Are there other forms of control? For example, automatic controls. And the formulation of solution used the negotiation engineering method, as well as technology. The agreement speaks of trade corridors defined by points of longitude and latitude instead of borders. It does not contain any disputed geographic names, but coordinates. The risk management of goods takes place before they enter the corridors with on-site monitoring and auditing of statistical data. And as regarding the access to the data, the work is done with electronic platforms, one of them being the integrated database of the WTO. So you see the importance of multilateralism. And trade statistics for all air, land, waterborne traffic are transferred to that database. And there is another platform that for the goods that enters or exist the corridors goes to an electronic platform provided for the agreement which received data relating to trade inflows and outflows. And the method is pragmatic and the problem made manageable, both by concentrating on specific sub-issues, technical sub-issues, and by depoliticizing them. Technical knowledge and objective criteria are applied to solve sub-problems and to achieve win-win solutions. And at the output level, the process results in solution which may be presented in mathematical terms as algorithms, formulas, or in form of categorization. The Swiss mediation was a success, and it illustrates how the problem-solving mindset of engineering science can be applied to a complex real-world negotiation. But ladies and gentlemen, a little mapping or artificial intelligence or machine learning will not be enough to revitalize multilateralism. That's what about we are talking tonight. And the international organization designed after the World War II are no longer respond to the current balance of power and can only survive by reform. And we have the means, we have the financial means in order to try to find solutions. But in order to find solutions, we have to balance the interest of the North and the interest of the South. And for that, we are missing as regarding global governance. We have to think about global governance. Perhaps we will speak about it afterwards, and not only about science. We should not believe that science will solve all the world problems. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this mini case study that really shows a very practical application, and we'll come back to that and how these methodologies can be scaled and we can teach them and we can train more scientists and diplomats in them. So let's turn to Yves, and from your perspective as rector of the University of Geneva, how can science contribute to better anticipating and navigating the growing complexity of international relations with the multiplicity of actors, scenarios, and data, and what emerging disciplines and academic disciplines are we even seeing that are going to tackle this?
I think, first of all, we need really to understand that the actual challenges are in a sense very much multidisciplinary. So we need really to take account of that fact and to create also some kind of new approach in order to attack this kind of challenges. And I think the universities like Geneva or other universities in Switzerland, the fact that they are comprehensive, that gives the possibility, the capacity also to address that question in a very multidisciplinary way. And I think that's quite important. It has been said by Michel, also by Joël. I think right now it's impossible just to address a question with a technological solution. We see that there are a lot of emotion in terms of negotiation also. And I'm very happy to say that in this campus, there is a Center for Affective Sciences. And it's really the fact that this kind of approach is only also able to bring something to negotiation in order to bring also something to understand why people are accepting a new technological development. And I think that's quite important. It has been said also by Marie-Laure Salle yesterday afternoon. We need also to introduce in that dimension the role of social sciences, as well as what we may say the hard sciences. That's the first, I think, condition in order that that the universities can bring what they can bring to negotiation, what they can bring to international relations. I think also it's a question of building trust. It has been said also yesterday evening. Building trust is not so easy. We need really to make sure that everybody understands how science works and what science can bring to the population. And right now, we can see also that there are a lot of people who are, in fact, by the social networks, a little bit in a situation in a society where they are no more addressed by the science, and they are really trying to take some kind of fake news that are diffused by the social networks. And I think that also science must take care of that. Machine learning, I think also artificial intelligence can bring something in order to fight against fake news. But it's not enough to fight against fake news, and we have to improve our scientific communication. And I think there are many things that we can learn also in order to address the population, in order to convince people that the truth is not so easy to develop. It's also very much attacked by fake news, by the social networks. So I think in this case, there are a lot of things that we can do in terms of artificial intelligence, in terms of you can do as universities, as different institutions of higher education. And that's for me very important. It's also a question of the fact that science is in long-term vision, and very often is in fact in contradiction with the fact that the politicians, that the population needs to have very rapid answer to some kind of challenge that we need to face. And the COVID-19 is really an example of that. I mean, the politicians were maybe expecting sometimes very rapid answer, while the scientific community has to really to advance with debate, with contradiction, with accumulation of data, and that was not so easy just to bring immediate solution to the population and to the politicians. So it's very important to make sure that the population understand that we are working on the long term, and not only to applied research, but also to develop fundamental research. I said it yesterday. In fact, if we had been able to develop the vaccine in a very rapid way, just like we did in the last year, it was due to the fact that 20 years ago, many people were working on that fundamental research to bring this solution right now. And it's really important that we understand that fundamental research has to be financed by the public sector. It's not the private enterprise that are able to invest so long and so much in the development of fundamental research, and that's also very important to understand. And finally, maybe the last word I would like to say up to now is the fact that the dialogue between science and international organization, between science and society, has to go both ways. It's only scientific community talking to the population, talking to the international organization, but also we need to understand what are the challenges that this international organization have to face, and it must work both ways. And the goal of such a platform like GESDA is really to create a dialogue both ways between science and international organization, but also that the international organization are able to bring to the scientific community the challenge that they have to face. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think you referred to three key keywords, to be redundant, that I think Nikhil can address quite well. One is the question of timeframes. Science works long term, and anticipation processes take time. But the UN system, the multilateral system, often the agendas are mostly driven by reaction to short-term crisis. So how do we fold, and then the second one would be interfaces. How do we fold science into global policy processes when we have these disparate timeframes and cultures and worldviews? And you, as the responsible for training a large number of diplomats around the world, how are you including this new thinking into building capacity among diplomats around the world?
Thank you, Marga. I'll dive into that question. But before I do that, I just wanted to express my great appreciation to the organizers of GESDA and the energy they brought, when I've been in these meetings for many, many years, 3 decades, and who on a Friday evening in a plenary would get a full hall like this. So congratulations. There is something that you've done to keep the energy and the enthusiasm of the participants. So I just wanted to start with that word of congratulations. Now, in these 3 decades that I talked about, I have been part of many global policy processes, especially on the economic and social and environmental and related fields in the General Assembly, for a short while with the Security Council. And then, of course, I closely follow what we aggregatively call global policy, whether it's G20 or G7, or you have the context of Europe and the African Union. I think global policy is an aggregation of all these, and the follow-up you do to conventions and treaties. For example, COP26, the climate process, which we'll be having a very significant meeting in Glasgow next month. So that aggregatively to me is global policy. And if I look back historically as to what has been the impact of science and science policy on affecting the outcomes of these processes, and has science really imbued the way in which political leadership had made decisions in the past? It's very important. I mean, the why question has been answered by speaker after speaker who says we have to do this. But if you look at the historical record of how political leadership has handled the issue of science in making global policy, I would say it's a very dismal record. It's a very sad record. I was in the climate process 32 years ago, and the way in which the diplomats handled climate change was so, if I look back now, it's really scandalous. All of us were, I was a delegate, I was leading the charge on many issues, but I must say my scientific basis of making the kinds of things we were working on way back in Shanti near Washington, DC, was very sad. So, but it's changing. It's not that this is static. The impact on science, on diplomacy, the impact of science in policy is changing, and actually the receptibility of our political leadership to the science voices they hear is one of the key determinants. So how are we going to in the future? So I feel the why question has kind of been answered in this wonderful summit we've had, but we are still struggling with the how. And what I would say in the how question, looking at all these aggregation of global policy processes, is that there's one thing, they're all very different, but one thing is common, is that first, as someone said, they are very crisis. The agendas are normally reflect the crisis of the day. It's not as if they have a very forward-looking agenda. It's not as if the G7 or the G20 will come up with looking 20 years into the future. They are looking only at immediate crisis. In fact, the G20 was probably created only to respond to economic and financial crisis in a sense. So how do we then get something like anticipatory science? We all know that the impact of all the things that you've been discussing are going to be very profound on human beings, on society. But why are these high profile political policy processes so ignorant of bringing these into their processes? So here on the how, I would say we need to act with a little more diplomatic nuance. We shouldn't, for example, try to put an agenda item on anticipatory science onto their agendas. It won't work. The G7 will never have an agenda item saying next 20-year impact of science on humanity, nor will the G20, nor will the Security Council, but there are opportunities. Let me give you one practical example. Switzerland is going to be on the Security Council, most probably for 23, 24. During those 24 months, there will be one or at least two opportunities when Switzerland will also be the president of the Security Council. And the president of the Security Council does have a great amount of discretion in determining what the discussions, the highlights of that month will be. And clearly anticipatory science and its impact on all the pillars of the United Nations, peace and security, human rights, health, environmental sustainability, all that, especially there have been discussions in the Security Council on climate change and security. There have been discussions on so many aspects in the Security Council. So I would urge that with such a forward-thinking diplomatic community in Switzerland, they must think now of how they'll bring some of these aspects into the Security Council. Similarly, if there is going to be a debate around climate change, it's very important that appropriate agenda item folds in some of the aspects we've been discussing here. Don't expect a standalone agenda item, but learn how to introduce some of these elements into the standing agendas in many of these high-profile global policy making political processes, including regional processes, including in Europe or Africa, or even national processes. There are subtle ways of bringing this in. And I think that is the first thing I would like to say about how. The second thing I wanted to briefly mention, I know I've spoken too long, is that when you go into a global policy processes, there are countries at very different steps of the development ladder and the information ladder. Now, if you want to expect, and if you expect such a diverse group of countries to sit together and come up with policy on an informed basis, that's not going to happen, because many of the poorer countries don't have the same information base on which they negotiate in these rooms, regardless of the subject, whether it's disarmament or places where the interface of science is the strongest. They just don't have the information base. So they hide behind very status quoist political positions. They don't want necessarily to engage in a more forward-looking way. So how do you level this playing field? I think GESDA and the others who are involved in this must focus a little on training and in enhancing the scientific basis for the engagement of those who don't have enough of this when they come into the negotiation room, when they come into the policy making room. So these are the two suggestions I would give on how to move your agenda forward in GESDA, of how to imbue global policy processes with more nuanced ways of looking at anticipatory science. And second, on how to level the playing field so that the poorer countries and those who collectively make global policy are all equally informed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nikhil, for this historical perspective. You've been working on this for more than 30 years. As you said, you were one of the main drivers behind the negotiation process for the SDGs. And thank you for persevering. So the fact that you're still here means that you haven't given up. So this is really, really encouraging. We have some reactions. I think Joel and anyone that wants to, we can have a little bit of an open dialogue before we turn to the audience questions.
Yeah, thank you very much for what you explained. When you said this, it came to my mind that actually science diplomacy is not something new. I was engaged myself in a fantastic project in Jordan where a synchrotron was built called Sesame that had as a partner Syria, Israel, Palestinian Authority, and so on. So all Iraq, Iran, all partners were there. And that was built on the model of CERN, actually, after the Second World War, when Germany and France were not talking to each other. And so that's also a way that we can explore. Can we learn? It seems that we have forgotten about these ways of proceeding. Now, what has changed between this time? And I think this is the sense of urgency that something is going to happen. So GESDA is also about anticipating. And we have heard today, for example, in quantum computing, that things will move in the next 5, 10, or 20 years. And we need to be prepared now in order that not part of the world will be forgotten. And this is what you are talking about. So imagine if this technology comes, the society needs to adapt to it. And it takes a decade or two to adapt. So we need to start now to be ready for this change. What we don't want to happen, and this is actually what's happening now, is that either a few countries have this technology or maybe a few companies. And so to make these kind of technologies available to humanity, this is one of the goals of GESDA. This is what we want to do. Today, we heard also about completely different field, so space, exploitation of resources in space. It reminds us what happened with the oceans, needed multilateral treaties. If we don't start now to set the rules, then we will have an issue in a few years from now, maybe a decade or two, because this is going to happen. And so what are the solutions to this? To find the dialogues with the diplomats, with the organizations? I think it's all about the education. And we heard too little during these 2 days about education. Just before, there was Nicolas Gisin explaining to the audience what is exponential. I think he did it quite well, actually.
Yes, yes.
And you know, I use a different method. I explained with the interest, the capital of the interest growing. The problem, not everyone has a bank account. So not in Switzerland it works, but maybe not elsewhere. And so we need to find the right way to communicate. And you have to know that in our universities, we are interdisciplinary already. And this is how we bring new products on the market. This can be in the life science, this can be in quantum computing, in environmental science. You have all kinds of engineers talking to each other. Now we need to make the next step. And the next step is to have scientists and diplomats understanding each other's, like you. You are a scientist and you are a diplomat. So you need actually to have the two education. And maybe also social scientists, maybe also other. So we need to train these kind of people in the future. And this is the way we want to go. It's not trivial because it's combining two different worlds that are maybe not compatible, but that's the only way. And we have here an example. And also I want to mention Michael Ambul, who was state secretary, who made the negotiations for the bilaterals with you together, and then he's a mathematician, and then developed this model. So this is the kind of people we need not only in Switzerland, in general.
Thank you. Just a reaction. GESDA is about science and diplomacy. And until now, we have spoken about how to bring more science into global governance, into global decision centers. And, but science is not only technology. Science is also social science, political science. And I mean, we haven't spoken about that. And I mean, for example, now we are in a situation where the global distribution of powers is changing, where you have the rise of new powers, where you have non-state actors emerging, where you have international terrorist organization also taking place at the global level. And as a basic concept of international relations now, the sovereignty of states is reinforced. It seems that it is becoming the ultimate value of the international, that dominates international exchanges, and foreign policy is increasingly understood as a promotion of national interest in the narrow sense of the word. That means understood especially as the economic and financial interest. And that's an orientation promotes isolationism and protectionism. And we are assisting in an erosion of multilateralism. And speaking about revitalization of multilateralism means also that we have to think about the evolution of, in the future, anticipating the evolution in the geopolitics. It is not sufficient to bring a little bit of science in the Security Council. It helps to give the Security Council or negotiators some technological basis and information that are not fake news, but help in the negotiations, etc. But it is not sufficient, because you can bring everything you want to the Security Council. The Security Council is blocked, and international organizations have problems. So I mean, we have to, GESDA, we have to think also not only about technology, but to think also about the evolution in the geopolitical world. And I mean, we have to think about how to reform the international organization. Here in Geneva, we are a hub of international organization, and we are able to make a diagnosis of all the problems we can find on the international level. So I think we have to think both on how to bring science and diplomacy to work together, to bring a little bit of science, of mapping, of good news, etc., information for the negotiators. We have to think also about how to develop the diplomatic science with the diplomatic engineering, but also we have to develop the social science and the political sciences.
Thank you very much. Yves.
Just very briefly, I think 2 points have been made by Joël, Micheline, and also Nikhil. The first one was really to the fact that we need to anticipate the technological development for 5 years, 10 years, 25 years, maybe. And we need really to be able to be ready for implementing that development. And it needs really to have also comprehension of what the people can understand, what they can believe. And we need to prepare that technological development. If you're not doing that, we'll miss this development. So we have seen it, in fact, in terms of the vaccine, in terms of the COVID application that has been developed, that were perfect in terms of techniques, but people were not ready to adopt that techniques. So we need really to anticipate that movement. We need to be ready for that development. And it means that the social sciences are very important in that aspect. And the second point I would like to address is what you said, Nikhil, the fact that here we have a platform which is in fact an open platform to everybody, to an open research data also. And this is quite important because we are not developing something for few countries. We are developing an instrument that should be addressed for all countries that can use then this kind of data, that kind of research result in order to improve, in fact, the negotiation And multilateralism means that everybody and every country needs to have access on that kind of platform. And I think the beauty of GESDA, of all the platform, is the fact that they are public platforms which are open to everybody and every country also. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very quickly,
Very
because we are running out of time.
Just on the communication piece, I think science has been timid because of the nature of science. You know, people are very guarded, cautious. They qualify everything they have to say. But communication today is really the world of politics and the world of media, where there's 10% of truth and 110% worth of bombast. And how the science, the voice becomes heard is changing. It's wonderfully changing, because I just give you the example of the IPCC reports. If you looked at the first few, up to say the last two assessment reports, they were so qualified that this may happen, this may not happen. So if you're a climate denier, you'll find enough evidence in that report to say, hey, this is all fake, it's not really happening. But it's changed now. If you look at the last assessment report, it's unequivocally clear of what human beings have done to our climate system. And the same thing is happening, whether it's in the vaccine area. So science is becoming much louder, and they've picked out leaves of the books of politicians and of media and communications, where even if there's a 5% chance of it happening, they make it sound as it's going to happen. So, and this applies to science and the scientific method. It's not really the physical and natural sciences and all that, but everything Michel Carmire talked about, whether it's social science, it's a scientific approach and a scientific method to facing the multi-dimensional problems of our contemporaneous world. And our ability to do that and communicate it better will do great service to humanity.
Thank you very much, Nikhil. Thank you all for the rich contributions and the food for thought. Unfortunately, we've reached the end of this first part. As I said in the beginning, this session now will have another very exciting part, which is going to be about some announcements. So for that, we're going to see another video while we switch. But let me please thank all the panelists and invite Stéphane Necoutier, who is the Secretary General of GESDA, to join us on stage, and while we switch the stage. Thank you very much all.
So, Excellencies, dear GESDA guests, I'm pleased and honored to join on stage two our very important partners Yves Flückiger, director of the University of Geneva, and Joël Mezot, the president of ETH Zurich. And both of them have been very instrumental and have been very helpful for GESDA to start, I would say, from the right foot. And during all those two years, especially, of course, Yves, as far as science diplomacy is concerned, and Joël, who has been co-chairing for 2 years, along with Martin Vetterli from Lausanne, EPFL Lausanne, the GESDA Academic Forum. In fact, we are here this evening to launch GESDA's Science and Diplomacy Capacity Building Initiative. And this in partnership with the Azuera Stiftung, a foundation located in the vicinity of Zurich, it's a Swiss German-speaking part of the country, which was created some years ago by Stefan Schminaini, and who is supporting our endeavor. With this, GESDA Foundation shares a view on the need of a global learning platform for bottom-up science diplomacy, as underlined yesterday in the opening panel by different speakers, and especially by the South African Minister for Cooperation and Foreign Affairs, Naledi Pandor. As a first step in this direction, we have been starting since 2 years to put together a broad coalition of Geneva, Swiss, and global partners in order to launch new capacity building programs to start with, to train anticipatory science diplomacy leaders. Before going into the details of some of the action that will be undertaken in the coming months and years, I would like to thank 3 persons in particular who has been very instrumental in making this happen. The first is not here, is currently in Rome. His name is Martin Chungong. He is member of the Diplomacy Forum chaired by Michael Muller at GESDA, and is a Secretary General of the Interparliamentary Union here in Geneva. The 2 other persons I would like to thank especially are sitting in front of us, Yves, Joël, and myself. The first one is Ms. Maga Gual-Soler, who is a member of our academic forum, who was moderating the panel before, a global leader in this promising field of science diplomacy. And my colleague, Sandro Giuliani, the executive director of our impact fund. And Sandro is currently the member of the board of directors of the Jacobs Foundation in Zurich and the Roger Federer Foundation. Since 2 years, he has been developing GESDA activities from our outpost in Zurich, in the premises of ETH, close to the office of Joël, and in close collaboration with the University of Zurich and the Swiss German-speaking ecosystem, in order to bring to GESDA a full Swiss touch and take advantage of the Swiss diverse types of cultures, languages, and excellence. Thank you to both of them present here, to the 3 of them, if Martin is listening to us remotely, and to all the members of the task force that is at the origin of the project I'm going to present to you now, very shortly. And you have all the logos, the mottos of these partners on your screen. Let me now quickly highlight some key figures of this capacity building initiative as it is as of today. First, the GESDA Science Breakthrough Radar will provide the key scientific framework for all the programs we are developing. That is the main contribution so far of GESDA to the coalition. And as displayed on the screen, the partners of GESDA in this initiative already include institutions and people behind the institutions from Geneva, Switzerland, and the world. In Geneva, we have currently 4 academic institutions, the university, the Graduate Institute of International and Development Studies, CERN, and the Geneva Science Policy Interface, the GSPI. We have also in Geneva 4 diplomacy institutions collaborating with the coalition, working for the world, but from Geneva. The Interparliamentary Union, I already spoke about, the SDG Lab, the Diplo Foundation, and the UN Institute for Training and Research, UNITRA. In Switzerland, as already mentioned, we have 2 academic institutions so far, the ETH Zurich and the University of Zurich. And on the global level, let me mention the International Network for Government Science Advice, INGSA, as well as the Foreign Ministry's Science and Technology Advice Network, FM-STAN. Now, what are we going to do concretely? As the first joint activity, the coalition will stage a Geneva Science and Diplomacy Week in May 2022 to provide immersion training for future leaders worldwide and open events for the general public. Also planned initiatives, GESDA is collaborating within this coalition, are an online science and diplomacy training course that is organized by the Diplo Foundation with contribution from the Geneva Science Policy Interface and GESDA. And this event and this activity is geared towards diplomats. A new executive MBA called EMBA-X will be organized also by ETH Zurich and the University of St. Gallen that uses the GESDA Science Breakthrough Radar as a framework in its future-oriented fireside chat series. But last but not least, of course, there is a new lab for science in diplomacy, jointly launched by the University of Geneva and ETH Zurich in collaboration with GESDA, that will use negotiation engineering and computational diplomacy as innovative tools to advance international relations. And we are very honored at GESDA that the 2 partners have chosen this Geneva Anticipation Summit as the platform for the launch of the new initiative. And with this, I'm pleased to hand over to Joël Mazeau and to Yves Flückiger. It's the order.
Thank you.
Wish
Thanks. So I don't know in which order you're going to speak, but
you are the host.
Yes, so I'm going to start, and I'm very happy and very proud also to announce this creation of this laboratory for science in diplomacy in collaboration with the ETH Zurich and University of Geneva, 2 institutions that are very well ranked, as you know, in the Shanghai ranking. We are both among the 100 best universities in the world, and ETH Zurich even in the 20 best in the world. 20, yes. 20. So I think it's a very a privilege and an honor to be able to create this collaboration. And I must say that it started really with 2 people in the audience that were just really very important for doing that. Michael Hamboul, who was working at the ETH Zurich, and Micheline Calmiret, who joined us at the University of Geneva. And then they started to work together and bringing the students together. And it was really the start of that collaboration, which is now concretized by this new chair at the University of Geneva and also at the ETH Zurich. I must say also for the University of Geneva being a comprehensive university, it's also a great pleasure for us and for me especially to thanks very much the Dean of the Faculty of Science, Jérôme Lacour, who is with us this evening, and also the director of the Geneva, of the Global Studies Institute, where they are already working together, bringing hard science with social and humanitarian sciences in order to bring that project together. And we are going to create 2 professorships. The first one will be located mainly in the Faculty of Science. It will be in data science with a specialization in machine learning and textual data processing. We have learned how it is important right now to have this kind of extension professorship in terms of data science, of machine learning and artificial intelligence. And the second one will focus on data categorization in relation to complexity theories and global studies, which will be mainly related to the Global Studies Institute. So again, maybe you are going to present now what's going to happen in ETH Zurich, but it's for us really a privilege to announce that launch tonight in the GESDA forum.
Thank you, Yves. I'm also extremely pleased that we have this collaboration. It's not only about stealing professors to Zurich. So, it's also about starting collaborations. And maybe just my reflection, what it was. You know, I grew up in Geneva. I had to learn the 17 international organizations that there was when I was a child. I don't know how many, Michael, there are now. 40. So you see the poor child, they have to learn 40 now. And so, you know, Geneva, the international Geneva is something that is very present in my mind. Before being at ETH, I was the director of the Palscher Institute, and I had the chance to be very often invited by our ministers to various kind of interesting trips. And I realized how much Switzerland is not known for all what we do in technology, in how the excellence of our universities, you know, chocolate and watches, it goes once or twice, but at some point. And so when I was interviewed for this job that I have, Bess Krasna can confirm, you or somebody asked me in the committee, what will you do that ETH is not doing now? And then I said, there are two things that I would like to do. One is to connect more technology to art, because I think it's something where we need to engage more. So we have started with the University of Art in Zurich in that direction. And the second one was to connect to international Geneva. And so we started to work on this. And then Michael Ambul came to me and showed me the amazing thing that he was doing, you know, putting in equation a conflict between countries. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about the kind of countries you were working on, but some with NK, U, and so on. So, you know, conflict that we all know about. And what he explained to me, and you confirmed this, Micheline, is that the emotion went down. People were trying to understand the equation. And so they needed to sit. And so they were suddenly at the table talking to each other. And I found this example so beautiful. So I said, well, now we did an experiment. So let's go on something stable on the longer term. And that's when we started to talk, the two universities, to each other, and to see how we can stabilize this initiative, because I believe in it. It is just a seed, it is just a start, but I believe that that we might make a change worldwide with this initiative. And I want to thank here again, Micheline, Michael, for providing this input and giving us the courage to go into that. I want to thank also GESDA, Stefan, Michael Muller. You have been great supporters along the way. That was sometimes bumpy, but also to raise the fund for this initiative. Thank you, Sandro, also for the support. And with this, I think I see 0 seconds. That I passed already since a minute, so I will stop. And we have launched the call for a new recruitment at the professorial level in negotiation engineering.
Thank you very much to you, Yves and Joël, and to all our partners. Of course, we are aiming at enlarging the coalition with all the interested people and participants. Of course, it will take some time. But in this perspective, I'm very honored and thankful to Mr. Enrico Letta, who will join us and give us a public keynote address to our summit at 7 o'clock at the Graduate Institute just next door, with Marie-Laure Salle, our partner, inviting him to hold a keynote speech as a former dean of international affairs at Sciences Po Paris, and therefore a colleague and a friend of Marie-Laure Salle. And he will refer to us on how to anticipate, accompany, and share the scientific revolutions to come. And he's not only a former Prime Minister of Italy, maybe a future Prime Minister of Italy, is not only still the president of the Jacques Delors Foundation, but when he was at Sciences Po, he really developed a program, pushed for a program in science diplomacy. And that's why Michael Muller invited him to join the Diplomacy Forum of GESDA. So we are very particularly honored that he is doing it tonight for us. I phrase again the title of his speech, How to Anticipate, Accompany, and Share the Scientific Revolutions to Come. So I think it's a beautiful way to end up this panel. But before moving to the Graduate Institute to listen to Enrico Letta, let me invite you now to a social break, to a social cocktail for informal discussion, along with the members of the Geneva Diplomatic Club that will take place close to here in the atrium. And I would like for this to give a warm thank you to its president, Raymond Lauretin, for setting it up with the GESDA Foundation. And again, after this, we will move to the Graduate Institute and try to let's say, to ignite a first project we have together with Marie-Laure Salle, that to put finally not only a proximity of both campuses, Biotech Campus and the Peace Campus, where the graduate is located, but also of proximity between formal experimental science with human social sciences. Thank you very much.